Walter Owen Bentley started experimenting with engine designs during World War I, with Bentley aluminum pistons being fitted to the Sopwith Camel, and Bentley Motors being founded immediately after the war, with car deliveries starting in 1921. Initially just chassis with coach builders doing the bodywork. Wheelbases were offered in 108, 118, and 130 inches. The engine was a 3-liter 4-valve overhead cam inline 4, and Bentley would soon move into racing competition, winning their first Le Mans in 1924. Issues caused by lack of funding were soon resolved by a regular influx of money by Wolf Barnato, allowing him to become the company chairman. 1926 added the 4.5-liter model, using an overhead cam 4.4-liter, or 270 cubic inch straight 6. 720 would eventually be built, including 55 supercharged versions, known as the Bentley Blower. Horsepower was 110 to 130, in a car that was typically 172 inches long on 130-inch wheelbase and 3,800 pounds. But 8 short 118-inch wheelbase versions were made. Around the same time, they also released the 6.5-liter, or Speed 6, a car offered on several wheelbases, using a 6.6-liter, 403 cubic inch 6, producing 147 horsepower. And Bentley would go on to win Le Mans in 1927, 28, 29, and 30. 1930 also added the 8-liter, an even bigger version of the 6, with around 220 horsepower, on wheelbases ranging from 138 to 156. But the Great Depression had Bentley in liquidation by 1931, and Rolls-Royce would put in a secret bid, winning control of the company. There was a new 3.5-liter model for 1933, using an 110 horsepower 3.7-liter straight 6 engine, and a chassis developed and built by Rolls-Royce. The new models were more about luxury than performance, and Warren Bentley would leave the company in 1935 to go work for Lagonda. For 1936, the car would become the 4.25-liter, using a bigger 4.3-liter, raising horsepower to 125 for the increasingly heavy cars. It would be updated in 1939 to become the Mark V, but production ended after just a few were built to move to the war effort. The post-war Mark VI was the first complete full-bodied in-house model, 192 inches long on a 120-inch wheelbase and 1,400 pounds, differing from Rolls-Royce in little but the grille. In 1951, it would get a bigger 130 horsepower 4.6-liter and a bigger trunk or boot for 1952 to become the Mark VII, or R-Type, the car that would introduce an optional 4-speed automatic to the standard 4-speed manual. There would also be a sportier new Continental Coupe version, with a lighter weight chassis and more power, for a 50% premium. 1955 would see the introduction of the Bentley S. In standard form, it was 212 inches long on a 123-inch wheelbase and weighed 4,200 pounds, with a bigger 127-inch wheelbase available. Steering and suspension were softened, and the straight 6 was up to 4.9 liters, with prices climbing over 6,300 pounds. Continental Coupe carried over. There was a new 6.2-liter 380 cubic inch V8 for 1959, making the car the S2, and then there was a facelift for 1962, when prices were down about 200 pounds. With the redesign of 1965, it became the T-Series, smaller at 204 inches long on a 120-inch wheelbase, but 4,600 pounds, still using the 6.2-liter V8. Starting at just over 5,400 pounds, it was 50 pounds cheaper than its all but identical Rolls-Royce counterpart, and the Continental was discontinued. Bentley sales had been somewhere around 700 annually since the end of the Second World War, but they would start to decline, and financial troubles would have Rolls-Royce separating their automotive divisions as part of restructuring. For 1971, the engine grew in size to a 6.8-liter or 410 cubic inch V8, and a successor to the Continental appeared, sharing the Corniche name with the Rolls-Royce. The car remained little changed until 1977, when it received a number of upgrades, such as rack and pinion steering, to become the T2. Vickers would soon take control of the automotive division of Rolls-Royce, and the restyled Bentley for 1980 took on the name Mulsanne, harking back to its Le Mans winning days. It was 209 inches long on a 121-inch wheelbase and 3,900 pounds. And to help along its performance image, A turbo was added for 1982, raising horsepower from adequate, or roughly 200, to a much more impressive 300, along with other upgrades. 1984 saw the introduction of the slightly decontented and 6,000 pound cheaper Bentley 8 as the entry-level model, starting under 50,000 pounds, and the coupe model would return to the Continental name. For 1985, the turbo became its own model as the Bentley Turbo R, and in 1987, the Mulsanne S gained all the features of the Turbo R, except the actual turbo. There was a new Continental R for 1991, giving Bentley some distinction to separate it from Rolls-Royce models, 210 inches long on 120-inch wheelbase, using the turbocharged V8, and starting at over $250,000 in the US, when the Mulsanne was a little more than $110,000. It was a car that would be replaced the next year by the Brooklands, which really was just a minor update, mostly to the interior, moving the gear selector to the center console. There was a limited edition Continental S for 1994-95, bumping output of the turbo to 385, when the base model rose above 180,000 pounds in the UK. Then 1995 saw the introduction of the Azure, a full convertible version of the Continental R. 1996 introduced a short wheelbase version of the Continental as the Continental T, only 206 inches long on 117-inch wheelbase, using a 400 horsepower version of the turbo engine. And the Brooklands R gained the engine of the Turbo R the same year, which was offered in long wheelbase form a year later as the Turbo RL, and getting the 400 horsepower version as the Turbo RT. Vickers would auction off Rolls-Royce motors, including the Bentley name, making it part of the Volkswagen Group in 1998. And the next year, the Brooklands was replaced by the Arnage. Developed before the sale, it initially used a 349 horsepower BMW twin-turbo 4.4-liter V8. Volkswagen quickly adapted the car to use the old engine, but both engines were offered into the year 2000, and they were identified as the green label for those with the BMW engine, and red label if you had the in-house engine. Volkswagen would also update the factory and add staff to increase production. Their first new product was the Continental GT, introduced in 2003, 189 inches long on 108-inch wheelbase, weighing 5,200 pounds. It was powered by a 6-liter twin-turbo W12 for 552 horsepower. Then it would be followed by the Flying Spur in 2005, essentially a 4-door version of the same car that was 208 inches long on 121-inch wheelbase and 5,500 pounds. And in 2006, the Azure would be updated onto the Arnage body, and soon company sales would reach 10,000. For 2011, a new Mulsanne would replace the Arnage, an all-new car that was 220 inches long on 129-inch wheelbase and 5,800 pounds in its most basic form. The 6.8-liter pushrod engine carried over with twin turbos, providing 505 horsepower in base form and 530 in the Speed Edition. There would also be a new Continental GT, getting a 500 horsepower 4-liter twin-turbo V8 as the base engine, and the W12 up to 616 horsepower as the option. And the Flying Spur would follow to the new design for 2013. In 2015, Bentley would enter the SUV market with the Bentayga, based on the Volkswagen Touareg. It was 202 to 210 inches long on 118 to 125-inch wheelbase, and over 5,400 pounds in base form. The twin-turbo 4-liter V8 and 6-liter W12 were initially offered, soon gaining an available diesel or hybrid option. The Continental GT was updated for 2018, and the Flying Spur for 2019, and the Mulsanne was dropped after 2020. And although the pandemic hit Bentley pretty hard, sales seem to have bounced back already. Like pretty much every company, particularly European ones, claims are that the future is fully electric. We shall see. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.